The sugar fields of St. Delacroix Plantation shimmered under the molten heat of a Louisiana summer, 1854. The air carried the scent of boiled molasses and sweat, and even the crows avoided the fields at noon. Beyond the rows of cane, the white-pillared manor rose like a ghost against the green, its paint peeling in long, pale curls. Inside, a family dined in silence, the clink of silverware louder than speech. Augustus Delacroix, the master, was a man built of pride and bourbon. His beard, once golden, had grayed into the color of ash, and his eyes were forever scanning the room as though hunting something only he could see. At the head of the table sat his wife, Claudine, pale and thin, her hair arranged perfectly, though her hands trembled on her fork. Beside her lounged their son, Lucien, whose grin was a blade, and the youngest, Odette, quiet, soft-faced, barely 16, her eyes a mirror of her mother's fatigue. The air in the dining hall felt wrong that evening. The scent of the meal, gumbo rich with crab and dark roux, filled the space with a weight heavier than hunger. Claudine sniffed delicately. Too strong, she murmured, though her stomach growled. Lucien only laughed and spooned it greedily, the sound of his slurping echoing through the room. She came from New Orleans, Augustus said, his voice low. They say she cooked for the Beauregards before their misfortune. A misfortune? Claudine asked without looking up. Their entire household fell ill, half dead before the doctor could even spell the word. He chuckled, darkly. Darkly. Yet she survived untouched. Now she's here. How lovely, Claudine said faintly. A woman who kills with seasoning. Lucien grinned. Maybe she'll cook up some excitement. This place could use a ghost or two. From the kitchen came a low humming, soft, rhythmic, like a song sung to the bones of the house. The sound seemed to rise through the floorboards. Claudine's fork paused mid-air. What is that? The new cook, Augustus replied. It says she hums while she works. Uncivilized, Claudine muttered. Tell her to stop. But he didn't. Something in that hum soothed him. Something ancient, steady. The new cook arrived 2 weeks ago. Her name was Maribel, a woman in her late 20s, dark-skinned, her hair coiled tight beneath a worn scarf. Her eyes caught the light like mirrors of brass, reflecting everything, revealing nothing. The overseer had purchased her at the docks, half price because no other buyer would take her. Too quiet, they'd said. Too strange. Her first morning at St. Delacroix, she walked barefoot through the kitchen, her steps slow and deliberate, as if memorizing every board. She spoke little, only to ask where the herbs grew. When told there were none, she smiled faintly and replied, "Then the land will provide." By noon, she had filled the kitchen with scents no one recognized, leaves from the bayou, roots dug near the riverbank, oils pressed from unknown seeds. The other slaves whispered as they worked, warning one another not to cross her path after dark. They said she spoke to shadows in Creole too old for living tongues. That first meal had been a masterpiece. Gumbo thick as velvet, crawfish and sausage simmered in something smoky and deep. The family devoured it, even Claudine, who claimed to despise heavy food. Yet after the plates were cleared, a strange silence fell. The air felt heavy, dense, as though filled with invisible heat. That night, Claudine dreamed of snakes, thin, glistening things slithering beneath her pillow, coiling around her throat. Lucien woke screaming, saying something crawled into his mouth while he slept. Even Augustus, hardened by war and whiskey, woke sweating through his sheets, the sound of Maribel's hum echoing in his ears. Morning came grey and wet. Rain turned the sugar fields into rivers of mud. The plantation stirred slowly, slaves trudging to work under the crack of the overseer's whip. In the kitchen, Maribel stood alone, grinding something in a stone mortar. The air smelled faintly metallic, like blood washed from iron. Odette, curious and timid, crept inside. "What are you making?" she whispered. Maribel didn't look up. "Medicine for what ails the house. Is it sick?" Maribel smiled without showing teeth. "Rot starts quiet, little one. You don't hear it till it's deep." Odette frowned, not understanding. She watched the cook tie a bundle of herbs with twine, then toss it into the fire. The flames flared green, and for an instant Odette thought she saw faces in the smoke, twisting, whispering. "Go now," Maribel said softly. "This kitchen remembers what the walls try to forget." Odette ran. At breakfast, Augustus announced a dinner for the parish judge and his wife. "We'll show them St. Delacroix still commands respect," he said. Claudine stared at her plate, expression hollow. Lucien smirked. "Respect's cheap when the fields are half dead and the sugar's black." Augustus slammed his hand down, rattling the table. "We will dine as Delacroix do, with dignity." He called for Maribel. She appeared at the doorway, head bowed. "We'll cook your finest," Augustus ordered. "We dine tomorrow night." "As you wish, master," she said, voice calm as still water. When she turned, Lucien caught her wrist. "I'll make mine special," he sneered. "Something that'll burn." Maribel met his eyes for the first time. "Every bite burns if you wait long enough." He laughed, but that night he dreamed of fire. As dusk fell, Claudine sat by the window of her room, brushing her thinning hair. She noticed small flakes on her shoulder, white and dry like ash. Her hands trembled. She stared at the mirror, saw her reflection blur for a moment, the skin beneath her eyes turning grey. "It's the heat," she whispered, but the mirror rippled, and behind her own reflection, she thought she saw another face, a woman's calm and watching. She screamed, dropping the brush. When Augustus burst in, the mirror was normal again. "A trick of the light," he said, irritated. "You're hysterical." But even as he left, he caught the faintest smell of burnt herbs and something sour, like meat left too long in the sun. In the kitchen, Maribel stirred her pot slowly. She added a spoonful of something black, thick as tar, whispering under her breath in an old tongue. "For greed," she said softly. Another spoon. "For pride." Then a final one, small and trembling. "For silence." She dipped her finger into the broth, tasted it, and closed her eyes. For a heartbeat, she seemed to disappear into the steam. Then she smiled, a slow, tired smile that did not reach her eyes. The house creaked as though it understood, and somewhere deep inside its bones, the rot began to spread. The morning sun came sluggish through the swamp mist, painting the plantation in a dull amber light. Dew clung to every leaf, and the air carried that sweet, almost metallic scent that warned of coming rot. Inside the manor, the kitchen woke before the roosters, pots clanging softly, fires crackling low, hands moving quick to prepare the day's breakfast. Maribel stood over the stove, bare feet steady on the warped wooden floor. She stirred a pot of chicory coffee so thick it seemed to swallow the light. Around her, the other kitchen slaves worked with wary glances. None spoke unless they had to. None wanted to be caught near her eyes too long. It had been 3 days since the first dinner, 3 nights since the dreams. Claudine had grown pale as wax, refusing food except the thin broth Maribel brought her. Augustus drank from dawn to dusk, and Lucien spent his days prowling the house, snapping at the servants, his temper sharp as the lash. Maribel hummed softly as she worked, the same low tune that seemed to breathe with the fire's rhythm. "Stop that humming," one of the younger girls whispered. "It brings bad luck." Maribel didn't look up. "Bad luck already sleeps under this roof, child." Humming only reminds it to stay quiet. Lucien entered the kitchen that afternoon uninvited. He wore his boots caked with field mud and the smug smile of a man who believed the world owed him fear. The room froze as he stepped closer to the stove, brushing ashes off his vest. "It smells good," he said, sniffing the air. "What's in it?" Maribel stirred once more, her face unreadable. "Whatever the master's table requires." Lucien leaned close, eyes glinting. "You think you're clever, don't you?" "Clever, don't you?" "I think," she said softly, "that food remembers who eats it." He laughed, grabbing the spoon from her hand. "Then let's see if it remembers me." Before anyone could stop him, he dipped the spoon into the pot and tasted it. The kitchen fell silent. Maribel only watched. He swallowed, smirking. "Oh, not bad. Maybe you'll earn your place here after all." But as he turned to leave, he stumbled, just slightly. His hand went to his stomach, confusion flashing across his face. What was? He stopped mid-sentence, forcing a grin. "A strong coffee," he muttered, and strode out. Maribel turned back to her pot, humming again as if nothing had happened. By nightfall, Lucien was sick. His laughter had turned to coughing, deep and ragged. He threw up twice before supper, once in the hall where the family portraits hung. Augustus ordered whiskey. Claudine wrung her hands and whispered prayers. Odette brought him water, but he slapped it away. "Don't look at me," he snarled, face pale as salt. "It's her fault." "Whose?" Claudine asked shakily. "That witch in the kitchen." Augustus barked, a bitter laugh. "Oh boy, you're drunk or delirious. You insult the woman who keeps this house fed." Lucien glared. "She's poisoning us. Can't you smell it? The food, it's rotten, sweet rot, like graves." No one answered. Claudine's eyes darted to the doorway, as though afraid the cook might be listening. When Maribel brought dinner, the master's voice was strained but controlled. "You'll eat what's served," he said, shoving a bowl toward his son. "And you'll thank her for it." Lucien leaned close, sneering. "You eat it first. Which?" Maribel smiled faintly, lifted a spoon and tasted it in front of him. Her expression never changed. "There," she said. "And now the curse is even." That night, Lucien awoke choking. The sheets clung to his skin, damp with sweat. He staggered to the wash basin and vomited something black, thick, oily, and alive with the stench of the swamp. His screams woke the house. Claudine rushed in, covering her mouth, horror in her eyes. Oh, dear God, what is that? But the vomit shimmered faintly, as if reflecting candlelight from within. When Augustus arrived, he found his son trembling, teeth chattering. "The doctor," Claudine gasped. "Send for the doctor. He's not sick." Maribel's voice came from the doorway, as she stood still, framed by the shadows. "He's being cleaned." Augustus turned on her, fury bright. Get out," he roared. Out of my sight, Maribel bowed slightly and left without another word. When the doctor arrived from Baton Rouge 2 days later, Lucien's fever had broken, but his eyes had changed. The once cocky boy now avoided mirrors, muttering of flies crawling under his skin. Meanwhile, Claudine's health faltered. She ate less each day, claiming everything tasted of ashes. The servants whispered that she was wasting away from the inside. Augustus ignored it, focusing on the accounts. Numbers bleeding redder every month. The cane fields were dying. The stalks stood limp and black, and the smell of decay drifted all the way to the veranda. Odette watched from the parlor window, her heart twisting with a dread she couldn't name. She often heard Maribel humming from the kitchen, the sound rising like smoke through the cracks in the floor. It was mournful, almost tender, as though sung to ghosts. One afternoon, Odette gathered the courage to enter. "Oh, Miss Maribel," the woman looked up from her cutting board. Her hands moved slowly, slicing herbs that shimmered green and silver. "Why do you hum?" Odette asked. "Mamma says it brings sickness." Maribel smiled softly. "The sickness comes from silence, child. Humming keeps the truth awake." Odette frowned. "Lucien says you cursed him." "I gave him what he asked for." She sprinkled the herbs into a pot. "Every wish has its weight." "Then are we all cursed?" Maribel didn't answer. The pot began to bubble, and a faint scent filled the air, sweet like flowers left too long in water. Odette backed away, heart pounding. "If you hate us, why stay?" Maribel's voice dropped low. "Because hate is easy. Justice takes patience." The whispers grew louder as weeks passed. The slaves spoke of things found buried behind the smokehouse, small bundles wrapped in cloth, bones of birds, a child's ribbon blackened by fire. The overseer confronted Maribel once, demanding she explain. She only met his eyes and said, "Dig deeper. You might find yourself." That night, the overseer didn't sleep. At dawn, he was gone. No one knew where. Some said the swamp took him. Some said he followed the humming and never came back. In the manor, the tension thickened. Claudine refused to enter the dining hall, claiming she smelled rot in the walls. Augustus drank until his hands shook. The once grand house began to show cracks, paint peeling, floors warping, air thick with mildew. At dinner one evening, Augustus slammed his glass down. "I built this house with my own hands," he growled. "I'll not watch it crumble under superstition." He glared toward the kitchen door. "But tomorrow, she cooks again, a proper meal. No nonsense." Claudine's lips parted in protest, but she said nothing. Maribel served them the next evening, duck glazed with honey and cayenne. The color glowed red under the candlelight. Augustus ate in silence. Lucien stared at his plate but dared not refuse. Claudine only watched. The moment Lucien lifted his fork, a fly landed on the meat. Then another, then a dozen. The candles flickered as the air filled with the sound of buzzing. Augustus swatted angrily, shouting for the servants. But the flies didn't scatter. They swarmed thick and relentless. Claudine screamed, tipping her chair. Maribel stood in the doorway, untouched. Her voice was calm when she spoke. "You can't hide rot with perfume, master. It finds the mouth in the end." The buzzing grew louder until it drowned every word. By morning, the flies were gone. The dining room lay silent, streaked with the stains of wings. Augustus forbade anyone to speak of it. But the servants whispered in corners, the word curse moving like smoke from lip to lip. And in the kitchen, Maribel began to hum again, slow, soft, and final, like a lullaby for the living dead. The heat came early that summer, thick as syrup and twice as suffocating. By mid-July, the sugar fields shimmered like molten glass. Even the birds were silent. The plantation, once proud and bustling, now seemed to sweat sickness from its walls. Paint bubbled, wood warped. A stench of mildew clung to every curtain. Still, Augustus Delacroix refused to show weakness. "I feast," he declared one morning, pacing the veranda like a man cornered by invisible debt collectors. "We'll host the planters from St. Martin and Terrebonne. Let them see the Delacroix name still commands wealth." No one dared argue, though Claudine's trembling hands betrayed her dread. Her once flawless complexion had turned grayish, her eyes sunken. She ate nothing, her tongue raw and blistered. Lucien, recovering from his mysterious sickness, now moved with a constant twitch, like something crawled under his skin. He kept his gloves on even in the heat, and Odette, pale and silent, drifted through the halls like a candle about to go out. Maribel listened from the doorway as Augustus barked his orders. Polish the silver, scrub the floors, and tell that cook of ours I want a meal they'll never forget. Her lips curled into a faint smile. As you wish, master, she said. The kitchen came alive with motion. Pots steamed, knives clattered, and the scent of roasting meat mingled with the damp air. Maribel worked silently, every movement precise, her eyes reflecting the flicker of the fire like twin mirrors of amber. She chopped herbs no one recognized, ground them into fine powder, and whispered words older than the land itself. The other slaves watched in uneasy silence. One, a boy barely 16, dared to ask, Miss Mary, what you making smell so strange? She didn't look up. A truth, she said simply, and truth always stinks before it shines. She stirred the sauce, a thick dark glaze that shimmered like blood under the lamplight. She poured it over the ducks, the sound of the liquid hitting flesh soft and final, like the last note of a prayer. By sunset, the manor glowed with candlelight. The guests arrived in fine carriages, their laughter forced, their perfume heavy enough to mask decay. Outside, the sugar fields were black with storm clouds gathering low over the horizon. Inside, Augustus greeted them like a man performing his own resurrection. Friends, he roared, welcome to St. Delacroix. You'll find no finer table in all Louisiana. They smiled politely, eyes darting around the crumbling interior. The wallpaper peeled like dying skin. The chandelier above them swayed, its crystals clouded with dust. Yet the table gleamed, silver polished to a blinding shine, crystal glasses filled with bourbon and pride. Claudine sat rigid, her smile trembling. Lucien slouched beside her, drunk before the soup was served. Odette stood behind her mother's chair, silent as ever. Then Maribel entered. Her presence quieted the room. She moved like smoke, gliding between chairs, setting down the platters, roasted duck glazed with honey and cayenne, corn cakes soaked in butter, gumbo black as night. The guests clapped politely, inhaling the aroma. Now this, said Judge Parnell, a portly man with sweat staining his collar, is the kind of feast that keeps a man alive in this cursed heat. Maribel bowed her head, murmuring something under her breath. The candles flickered, but no one noticed. As they began to eat, the hum of conversation returned. Forks clinked, glasses clattered. Augustus laughed too loudly, trying to drown the unease that clung to every wall. Fine work, Maribel, he called, raising his glass toward the kitchen door. You've redeemed this house yet. But even as he said it, a faint buzzing filled the air, soft, almost musical. One of the guests swatted at his ear. These swamp flies, damn pests, he muttered. Another waved her napkin, frowning. The buzzing grew louder. A fly landed on Claudine's hand. She froze, staring at it. Its wings glistened gold in the candlelight. Then another landed on her cheek. She brushed it away, and 3 more took its place. Within moments, the table was alive with them. Small black bodies crawling over the plates, dipping into wine glasses, clustering at the corners of mouths. The guests gasped, some shouting, others gagging as they realized their spoons were filled not with duck or gumbo, but squirming black insects. Screams filled the hall. Chairs toppled. Glass shattered. Lucien stumbled to his feet, swatting wildly, eyes wide with terror. Make it stop, he cried. Make it stop. Maribel stood at the far end of the room, expression calm, untouched by a single fly. Claudine collapsed against the table, gagging. Augustus grabbed his pistol from the mantel and fired a shot into the air. The sound silenced the room, but the flies only thickened, pouring from the cracks of the ceiling, from the mouths of the dishes, from the very air itself. What have you done? Augustus shouted. What devilry is this? Maribel met his gaze. I served what you feed the world, master. Decay, the guests fled, trampling each other at the door. Outside, lightning tore across the sky. The air reeked of burnt sugar and rot. Inside, Augustus turned on Maribel. You witch! He seized her by the arm and struck her across the face. The blow echoed like thunder. You've ruined me. My name, my family, everything. She stood perfectly still, blood glistening on her lip. Your family ruined itself, she said softly. You just needed a mirror bright enough to see it. Enough of your riddles, he struck her again. You'll hang by morning. She raised her eyes, calm and steady. You can hang me, but the house will still eat itself. Lucien, shaking and feverish, stared at her. "She's lying," he whispered. "It's a trick. Just a trick." But his voice cracked halfway through, and he vomited on the table, black liquid crawling with dead flies. Claudine screamed. Odette wept silently, her hand pressed over her mouth. Augustus turned to call the overseer, but no answer came. Only the sound of the flies, thick and suffocating. Maribel picked up her fallen headscarf, tied it neatly back in place, and said, "Dinner is over." Then she walked toward the door, the sea of buzzing parting around her like water. No one dared stop her. By dawn, the manor was silent. The guests never returned. News spread fast through the parish of how the Delacroix feast had ended in madness, how their food turned to insects, how their cook disappeared into the swamp before sunrise. The slaves whispered that they saw her by the riverbank that morning, her hands washing something dark from a pot, singing softly to the reflection of the rising sun. Augustus ordered the fields burned that day, as if fire could cleanse what had taken root. But when the first torch touched the cane, a swarm of flies erupted from the stalks, blackening the sky. The overseers dropped their torches and fled. The fire never caught. That night, the livestock began to die, one by one, found bloated, their bodies slick with flies. The stench of rot grew unbearable. Claudine locked herself in her room, sobbing prayers into the walls. Lucien stopped speaking altogether. He sat on the veranda, eyes empty, whispering to the insects that gathered around his boots. Augustus drank alone in his study, muttering, "It's just bad fortune, it'll pass." But deep down, even he knew, something ancient had been called, and it was not finished. In the kitchen, Maribel's fire still burned. No one knew how. No one dared enter. But sometimes, in the dead of night, Odette swore she heard the sound of her mother's silverware clinking, plates being set, soup being stirred, a feast being prepared for ghosts. The hum returned too, low and sorrowful, rising through the floorboards until it filled every room. And from that night on, the flies never left St. Delacroix. They lived in the walls, in the bedsheets, in the very breath of the family that rotted from the inside out. The morning after the feast dawned grey and airless. No bird sang. The cicadas had gone silent. Only the drone of flies pulsed through the corridors like a heartbeat. Claudine Delacroix woke with a start, the bedsheets clinging damp to her skin. Her mouth tasted of copper. A faint buzzing pressed against her ear, and when she brushed her hair aside, her fingers came away smeared with something black. At first, she thought it was soot from the hearth. Then the smell reached her, sweet and spoiled, like fruit left too long in the sun. She screamed. The maid who came running from the hall dropped her tray when she saw the sight. Claudine's scalp had blistered overnight. Where her hairline met the temple, small boils had risen, each one twitching with something moving inside. Fetch the doctor," Claudine shrieked. And now, the maid fled without a word. Downstairs, Augustus sat slumped in his study, the curtains drawn tight against the morning. He hadn't slept. His pistol lay on the desk beside a half-empty bottle. Flies crawled across the rim of his glass, drowning themselves in whiskey. He didn't even swat them away anymore. When the overseer knocked softly, Augustus didn't look up. "What?" "Sir," the man said, voice trembling. "The workers. They're refusing to go into the cane fields. Say there's something out there. Livestock still dying. The smell." He trailed off, clutching his hat to his chest. Augustus rubbed his temples. "Then tell them I'll dock every man's pay who disobeys me." The overseer swallowed. "Sir, begging your pardon, but they ain't refusing for fear of you. They say it's the cook's curse. They say she left something in the soil that made Augustus look up, his eyes bloodshot and desperate, flicked toward the window. Beyond the glass, the once golden fields lay grey, hunched under a shroud of fog. The stalks moved, though no wind touched them. He gripped the pistol again. Find her. Bring her back. But deep down he already knew she wouldn't be found. Upstairs, Claudine retched into a porcelain bowl. The doctor from town arrived near noon. A thin, pale man who smelled of brandy and fear. He peeled back the cloth from her face and staggered back. The blisters had opened into small craters. A faint black ooze leaked from them, shimmering with tiny legs. "Dear God," he whispered. "You do something," Claudine screamed. "You're a physician, not a priest." He fumbled for his instruments, dabbing the wounds with vinegar and lye, whispering apologies between every motion. The smell of burning flesh filled the room. Claudine howled until her voice cracked. When it was over, he wrapped her head in clean linen and left trembling. "It's the fever," he told Augustus on the stairs, "and nothing more. But if it spreads, burn everything she's touched." "A burn?" Augustus repeated. "It's all you can do. The doctor never returned to St. Delacroix. That night, Odette crept into her mother's room. The girl's candle shook in her hands. Claudine lay still, the sheets soaked dark around her. "Oh, Maman," Odette whispered. A dry rasp came from the bed. "Stay away." The girl stepped closer. Claudine turned her head slowly, and Odette gasped. The linen had slipped. The wound had grown. A black hollow now gaped along her cheekbone, pulsing faintly. Within it, something wriggled. "Ha ha ha, he can feel them inside," Claudine murmured. Eating, singing, Odette dropped the candle. It hit the floor and went out. The darkness swallowed her mother's face, but the smell remained. She ran, bare feet slapping against the hall tiles, past the servants who whispered prayers behind doorframes. Down in the kitchen, the fire still burned, though no one tended it. The pots clattered by themselves. Sometimes in the still hours, the servants heard a woman humming softly, an old Cajun lullaby. They swore it was Maribel's voice. One evening, a brave boy went to see for himself. He found the hearth cold, but a bowl still sitting on the counter, half filled with black gumbo, steam rising, though no coals glowed beneath. He never set foot in that kitchen again. On the third day, Claudine's rot spread to her throat. She couldn't eat or drink. Augustus ordered the window sealed to keep out the stench, but it seeped through the walls anyway. Lucien, pacing the veranda, began scratching at his skin again. "She's dying slow," he muttered. "I like she deserves." "Watch your tongue," Augustus growled. Lucien turned, his eyes glassy. "You think this is punishment for her? This is your doing, Father. You brought her here. You kept that woman under this roof. She warned you." Augustus slapped him hard. "Mind yourself." Lucien laughed, a cracked sound that ended in a cough. "You can't beat the curse out of us." That night, thunder rolled across the bayou. The house groaned as if something enormous leaned against it. Claudine's fever broke into delirium. She clawed at the sheets, babbling half-coherent prayers. "Maribel," she whispered again and again. "Maribel, forgive me." The maids huddled in the hall, refusing to go in. Odette sat at her mother's bedside, holding her hand. Outside, lightning flashed, revealing for an instant the silhouette of a woman in the yard, barefoot, still as stone, head bowed. When the light faded, she was gone. Head bowed. When the light faded, she was gone. Odette turned to the window, heart pounding. "Mama," she said. "She's here." Claudine's eyes opened wide, milky and terrified. Tell her to stop the singing." But the song only grew louder. The same lullaby, rising from the floorboards, from the walls, from the cracks of Claudine's own teeth. She screamed until her voice broke. By morning, she was gone. The servants found her body cold, the bed soaked. The linens were alive with flies, thousands of them. When Augustus tore back the blanket, he staggered and retched. Claudine's skin had collapsed inward, her chest caved, as though something had eaten its way out. Her mouth hung open in a silent wail, teeth slick with black residue. Odette fainted. Lucien stood in the doorway, whispering as she took her soul back. Augustus roared, "Enough of your madness," and struck him again. But this time Lucien didn't react. He only smiled. That same hour, the last of the field hands packed up and left without pay. The plantation fell silent except for the droning of the flies, constant and thick. That night, Augustus sat alone by the fire, his wife's wedding ring clutched in one fist. He hadn't noticed that the portraits on the wall, the Grand Delacroix ancestors, had begun to change. The paint darkened, the faces blurring, as if the eyes refused to meet his anymore. From somewhere deep in the kitchen came the sound of stirring. A voice whispered just loud enough for him to hear, "A dinner's ready." He turned, gun trembling in his hand. "Show yourself." But there was only the empty hallway and the faint smell of roasted meat. Rich, sweet, impossible. He lowered the pistol. His reflection in the window looked older than he remembered. And when he leaned closer, he saw the faint shimmer of flies crawling across his image, though the glass itself was clean. He shut the curtains. Upstairs, Odette sat awake beside the empty bed. The candle guttered low, wax spilling like tears. She pressed her hands to her ears, but she could still hear it. The slow, rhythmic hum from the walls, the song her mother had begged to silence. And somewhere in the distance, beyond the cane fields, the swamp whispered back. By August, the Delacroix house was unrecognizable. The curtains hung in tatters. The once polished floors were veined with cracks. A sour dampness clung to everything, books, clothes, air. The servants had all gone, save for one old hand, Samuel, who refused to leave the property out of loyalty or fear. No one knew which. Lucien wandered the halls barefoot, his shirt half-buttoned, muttering under his breath. The flies followed him everywhere. They hovered above his shoulder, crawled in his hair, slipped behind his collar. He had stopped swatting them days ago. Sometimes he whispered to them, smiling as they buzzed in answer. Odette avoided him when she could. She still wore black for her mother, though her veil was always damp with tears and mildew. At night, she locked her door. Once, she woke to find Lucien standing in the hallway, staring at her knob. He didn't knock. He just listened to the sound of her breathing, then shuffled away, humming the same tune their cook used to sing. In the daylight, Lucien took to sitting on the veranda steps, his eyes fixed on the fields. The cane had turned brittle and grey. The swamp beyond shimmered like a bruise. Every now and then he thought he saw movement, a woman's shape drifting between the stalks, her apron fluttering like wings. He began sketching her on scraps of paper, a faceless figure in a kitchen dress, always surrounded by flies. The drawings filled his room, taped to the walls, pinned above his bed. He called them Maribel's shadows. When Augustus found them, he tore them down in fury. "You shame your mother's memory with this filth," he shouted. Lucien only laughed, a sound that cracked like breaking glass. "You think she's dead," he said, tapping his temple. "She's here, in the buzz, in the smell, in the mirror." That night, Augustus woke to footsteps outside his door. He rose, candle in hand, and found Lucien standing there, drenched in sweat, eyes wide as if lit from within. "Fair speaking," Lucien whispered. "All of them. The walls, the fields, the swamp. She's calling me to finish what she started." "Get to bed," Augustus snapped. "She says it's not done." Lucien tilted his head. "She says the bloodline's still foul." Augustus grabbed his arm, shaking him. "You'll stop this talk, boy, or I'll—" "You'll what?" Luston's tone changed, calm, low, mocking. "Whip me, like you did them, like you did her?" Augustus froze. The candle flickered. For the first time, the old man saw something in his son's face he didn't recognize, an echo of his own cruelty looking back at him. Lucien smiled faintly. "You can't beat out what's already inside us, father. The rot runs too deep." He walked away, leaving his father trembling in the doorway. The next morning, Samuel found the stables empty. The horses had broken loose sometime in the night, their tracks leading toward the swamp. He swore he saw strange symbols carved into the wood beams, circles crossed with X's, drawn in something dark that smelled of iron. Augustus confronted Lucien, who sat carving a spoon at the kitchen table. "What have you done to my animals?" Lucien looked up slowly, knife glinting in the weak light. They were restless," he said, "so I freed them. Freed them, just like she freed us all." Augustus slammed his fist on the table. Enough of that devil woman's name, but Lucien didn't flinch. He leaned forward, eyes feverish. She was a servant, a slave, and yet she had more power than you ever will. You think land makes you a god? She fed you your own damnation one meal at a time. Augustus struck him hard across the face. Lucien stumbled back, bleeding from his lip. For a heartbeat, silence held. Then Lucien began to laugh again, deep, shuddering laughter that rose until it filled the room. The sound sent chills crawling up Augustus's spine. That night the storm returned. Rain hammered the shutters. The house shook. Augustus sat in his study, staring at his reflection in the window. The candlelight shimmered, and for a moment he saw not himself but Maribel, her eyes gleaming like coals, her lips moving silently. He turned away and poured another drink. "Just ghosts," he muttered, "just guilt and rum." Upstairs, Lucien tore apart his room. He ripped open the mattress, the sheets, the floorboards. He was searching for something. When Odette dared to peek inside, he turned on her, eyes blazing. As she hid it, he shouted. "The last piece, the charm that binds this house." Lucien, please," she whispered. "You're frightening me." He stopped suddenly, breathing hard. "You hear her too, don't you? Don't you? When you sleep?" The humming, Odette's eyes filled with tears. "Yes," he smiled faintly. "Then we're both chosen." She backed away. Chosen for what? He leaned close enough for her to smell the rot on his breath. For the feast. At dawn, Samuel burst into Augustus's room. "It's your boy. He's gone." Augustus pulled on his boots, rage masking fear. "Gone where?" Samuel pointed toward the swamp. Took the lantern and a sack. Said he was going to find her. Augustus snatched his rifle from the wall and stormed out into the fog. The swamp greeted him like a living thing. Hot, wet, humming with unseen life. Flies swirled around his head in a thick halo. Every shadow looked like a woman. Every ripple in the water whispered her name. "Lucien!" he shouted. No answer. He pressed on, the mud sucking at his boots. The sound of the river grew louder until it became something else. A chorus, hundreds of wings, the same humming he'd heard in his dreams. Then he saw the light. Lucien stood knee-deep in the water, lantern swaying from one hand, the other holding a bundle of rags. A son Augustus called, a voice shaking, "Come away from there." Lucien turned. The lantern's glow revealed his face streaked with mud and blood, eyes wild. "I found her," he said. "She's here, father. She never left." He lifted the bundle, and Augustus realized with horror. It wasn't rags but bones, small, blackened, bound together with twine and beads. "Put that down," Augustus shouted. Lucien smiled. "She said this house was born on hunger, so now it will eat." He dropped the bundle into the water. The ripples spread in perfect circles. The air thickened. The buzzing grew deafening. Lucien, but his son only stepped deeper until the water reached his chest. The swamp began to churn, black bubbles rising around him. Flies poured from the surface like smoke. Augustus ran forward, grabbing his arm, but Lucien's flesh was ice cold, slick with something that writhed beneath the skin. "She's inside me," Lucien whispered. "You can't stop her now." The lantern flickered and went out. When Augustus blinked, his son was gone. Only the ripples remained, and the faint echo of laughter carried on the humid air. He stumbled back toward the house at dawn, soaked and trembling. Samuel found him standing on the porch, staring at the horizon. "Did you find him, sir?" Augustus didn't answer. His eyes were hollow. His hand still trembled. Later, Odette went to her brother's room. The walls were covered in symbols drawn in blood and ash. On the desk, a single plate sat waiting, empty, save for one black fly, perfectly still in the center. When she brushed it aside, it didn't move. It had been carved from bone. That night, she dreamed of Lucien sitting at a long table, smiling across from their mother. Between them stood Maribel, ladling dark stew into silver bowls. When she woke, her sheets were crawling. The house at St. Delacroix had grown hollow. Wind moved through its corridors like breath through ribs. Dust hung thick as fog, dimming the candlelight. Even the clocks had stopped ticking. Augustus Delacroix, once the proud patriarch of Louisiana's finest sugar plantation, now drifted from room to room, like a ghost haunting his own legacy. He hadn't shaved in weeks. His hair, once gleaming silver, was yellowed with sweat and neglect. Lucien was gone. Claudine was in the ground. And Odette, the only one left, rarely came out of her room except to whisper prayers over the balcony railing. The servants had long since fled. Only Samuel, stooped and grey, still moved through the house. He cooked little, slept less, and muttered that the place wasn't right no more. One evening, Augustus called him into the study. The air smelled of gun oil and burnt. The walls were lined with portraits, faces of Delacroix ancestors staring down in judgment. "Samuel," Augustus said quietly, "tell me the truth. You've worked this land near 40 years. What do they say about that woman?" "The cook," Samuel shifted his weight. "They say she'd gone back to the swamp." "But not alone." Augustus's eyes narrowed. "Meaning, they say she walked with the dead, sir. That the river talked to her at night. Say she cooking again, but now it's for the other side." The old man's voice dropped lower. "Sir, she ain't done with this house." Augustus slammed his glass down. "Enough superstition. The only thing haunting this place is weakness. My wife lost her mind. My son drowned like a fool. And now you, my last servant, feed me ghost stories?" Samuel's gaze flicked toward the window, where the dark pressed against the glass like a living thing. "You can call it stories if you like, sir," he said softly, "but the truth don't care who believes it." He turned to leave. "Wait," Augustus said. "If she's still out there, what does she want?" Samuel didn't look back. To finish the meal. That night the rain came, a black endless downpour that drummed against the shutters and seeped through the roof. The floorboards creaked with the weight of the storm. Augustus drank until the bottle was empty, then stumbled to the window. Through the sheets of rain, the sugar fields glistened like the backs of snakes. Somewhere in that darkness, he thought he saw a light, a single lantern swaying far out near the swamp's edge. "Lucien," he whispered. But the longer he looked, the more the shape changed. It was smaller, slower, almost graceful. A woman's gait. The sight filled him with both longing and dread. He opened the door and stepped into the rain. The mud clung to his boots as he crossed the veranda. Lightning flashed, revealing the cane fields bent under wind. The smell of rot rolled from the earth, heavy and wet. He followed the lantern light, though it seemed to retreat with every step. His breath came hard. The night hummed, flies, frogs, the low whisper of the swamp, alive with hunger. Then he saw her. Maribel stood by the old willow near the water's edge. The same grey headscarf, the same quiet posture. She was turned away, hands busy at something unseen. "Maribel!" he shouted. She didn't move. "Maribel! Finally she turned. Lightning flared again, and his stomach lurched. Her face was calm, but her eyes were wrong, flat and dark, like water reflecting nothing. "You called for me, master," she asked softly. "You'll answer for what you've done," he growled, raising the pistol. "You destroyed my family." Her voice didn't rise. "I only fed them what they made me serve," whispered softly. He stepped closer. "Where's my son?" She glanced toward the river, feeding the earth. His hands shook. "I'll put you down myself." "You already did," she said. Long before tonight, and before he could blink, she was gone. Only the lantern remained, floating a few feet above the water, its flame still burning despite the rain. He fired. The light vanished. The echo of the shot rolled through the cane fields, and from the house behind him came a sound. Not thunder, not wind, but the shattering of glass. Augustus ran back, heart pounding. The front door stood open, swaying in the storm. Inside, every portrait on the walls had fallen. Frames cracked, faces torn. "Samuel!" he shouted. No answer. He searched the dining hall. The long table had been set again. Plates gleamed in the candlelight. The silver was spotless. At the head of the table sat a single chair turned toward him. He stepped closer and froze. A body sat there, head bowed, hands folded neatly on the lap. It was Samuel. His throat had been slit clean, the skin black with flies. The plates were full gumbo, cornbread, duck, each steaming, though no fire burned. Augustus stumbled back, bile rising in his throat. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." The chandelier above him began to sway. The candles dimmed, one by one, until only a single flame remained, burning black. Then came the humming, soft at first like a lullaby from another room, then louder, closer, until it vibrated through the floorboards. "Maribel," he whispered. The door behind him creaked. He turned. Claudine stood there, her skin grey, her eyes hollow. Her lips parted as if to speak, but from her mouth spilled not words but flies, pouring in a shimmering stream to the floor. He staggered back, horrified. A god in heaven. Then Lucien appeared beside her, half-soaked, his face eaten away to bone. "We told you," he rasped. "She's not finished." They stepped forward in unison, moving like puppets. "Stay back!" Augustus roared, firing blindly. The gunshots echoed through the hall. One bullet shattered a mirror, another hit the chandelier. Sparks fell like fireflies, but the figures didn't stop. They kept walking, their feet dragging through the blood pooling beneath the table. He fled up the stairs, gasping, the walls closing in around him. The buzzing filled his skull. He slammed the door to his bedroom and locked it. "They're not real," he muttered, pacing. "It's the fever, the drink. They're dead, all dead." But when he turned to the mirror, the reflection was not his own. Maribel stood there instead, her face inches from his. He froze, breath caught in his throat. "Why?" he whispered. "We, my house. Why me?" Her reflection blinked slowly. "Because every meal carries memory. Every crumb remembers who starved and who feasted." He reached out to touch the glass, and a hand met his from the other side. The surface rippled like water. Then her eyes rolled white, and a voice, not human, spoke from behind the glass. "You are the final course." The mirror cracked. Augustus screamed and stumbled back. The sound of wings erupted around him. Flies burst from the walls, the ceiling, the bed, filling the air in a living storm. He fell to his knees, choking as they swarmed his face, his mouth, his lungs. He clawed at his throat, but the more he gasped, the deeper they went. In his last moments, he saw Maribel's shadow standing in the doorway, silent, watching. Her voice drifted through the roar of wings. "And now the table is clean." Then the candles went out. By morning, the storm had passed. The sun rose pale and distant. Odette found her father's room empty except for his boots, his pistol, and a chair still rocking gently near the mirror, its surface now black as tar. From the open window, a single fly escaped into the dawn. The morning after the storm, Odette Delacroix woke to silence, so deep it hurt. The usual sounds, the rustle of servants, the creak of wagons, even the wind in the cane fields, had vanished. Her nightdress clung damp to her skin as she stepped into the corridor. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, pooling on the warped floorboards. The wallpaper had bubbled and peeled, exposing long scars of wood beneath. "Papa?" she called softly. No answer, only the hollow echo of her voice winding down the stairwell. She descended slowly, barefoot, one hand trailing along the banister. The air was heavy, not just with the scent of rot, but something sweeter beneath it, like overripe fruit left too long in the sun. When she reached the first floor, she stopped dead. The dining room door was open. Inside, the long table stood perfectly set, silver gleaming, plates polished, crystal glasses catching the faint light. But the food on each dish was spoiled black, the air above it crawling with flies. Odette covered her mouth. "Is Samuel?" she whispered. A sound came from the corner. A low, wet dragging. She turned and saw him. The old servant was slumped against the wall, his head bent at an impossible angle, eyes clouded and still. His hand rested on the base of a chair as if he had tried to stand. One last time, Odette stumbled back, tripping over the edge of the rug. Her breath came sharp and uneven. "Papa!" she screamed, but her father did not answer. The storm had stripped the land bare. When she opened the veranda doors, she saw that the sugar fields lay flattened, acres of cane drowned beneath a grey film of water. The sky was pale and strange, like old parchment. She thought of leaving. She even packed a bag, her mother's rosary, a loaf of bread, a rusted pistol from her father's drawer. But when she reached the front gate, something stopped her. The air shifted. It was almost imperceptible, a faint exhale from the direction of the house, as if the building itself had drawn a breath. She turned back slowly. The shutters fluttered, though no wind stirred. Somewhere deep inside, a door creaked open. She dropped her bag. "Papa!" Nothing. But she could feel it now, a slow rhythmic pulse beneath her feet, running through the porch boards up the columns into the walls. The house was breathing. She ran back inside, calling his name over and over. Each room seemed to stretch, the corridors longer than she remembered, the air thicker. In her father's study, the scent of whiskey and gunpowder lingered. His boots sat neatly by the desk. The pistol was gone. The mirror on the far wall was cracked down the path behind her was longer than it should have been, the fields bent in unnatural curves. "I know," she murmured. "I came this way. But when she looked up, the house stood before her again. Whole. Dry. Lanterns burning in every window. She stepped back, horrified. From the porch came a sound. The front door creaked open, slow and deliberate. A woman stepped out. For a moment, Odette didn't breathe. The woman looked exactly like her. Same face, same dress, same trembling hands. The other Odette smiled faintly. "You left the table before the prayer was done." Then the double turned, walked inside, and the door closed behind her. Odette screamed, throwing the rosary into the mud. She turned and ran blindly into the fields. But the sugarcane had grown back, impossibly tall leaves whispering like voices. She pushed through, heart pounding, but every direction led her deeper in. Behind her, the house began to hum again. Low, rhythmic, alive, the cane rustled, the ground pulsed beneath her feet, and as night fell, the last Delacroix daughter was swallowed by the land her family once ruled. The house exhaled, long and slow, its windows flickered once more with candlelight, and from deep inside came a sound, the clinking of plates. Dinner, once again, was served. The sun rose pale over St. Delacroix Plantation, its light dull and colorless, as if even dawn refused to shine upon the place. Mist hung low over the drowned fields, soft as gauze, veiling what had once been rows of sugarcane. The house stood quiet, too quiet, its white columns streaked with brown and moss, its windows clouded from within. A lone bird circled the roof, then veered away sharply, wings beating fast as though it sensed what the land now carried. Inside, a single candle burned on the dining table. Its flame wavered against the still air. The table was set again, every plate polished, every glass placed exactly as before. The chairs stood in perfect formation, waiting. Only one figure moved through the dim hallways. Maribel, the cook who had come from nowhere and brought ruin with her. She moved slowly, deliberately, her bare feet silent on the warped floorboards. The air followed her, thick and slow, as though time itself obeyed her pace. The kitchen behind her was spotless, not a stain, not a trace of last night's storm. The pot on the stove still steamed faintly, though no fire burned beneath it. Maribel stopped by the doorway and looked into the dining room. The family had returned to their seats. Augustus Delacroix sat at the head of the table, rigid as a carving, his hands locked around a glass of bourbon. His eyes stared into the middle distance, pupils milk-white, face drawn tight as paper. Claudine was beside him, her once elegant neck now twisted slightly, the pearls still around her throat. Her fingers were folded neatly on her lap, nails grey and cracked. Lucien lounged where he always had, one arm draped over the chair, his smirk fixed permanently, skin pulled tight around teeth that no longer shone, and at the far end, Odette, the daughter, sat straight-backed, eyes wide open, lips parted slightly as if mid-breath. They were perfect in their way, preserved. Still, Maribel walked the length of the table, her expression unreadable. She adjusted Claudine's napkin, straightened Lucien's spoon. Then she paused at Odette's chair. "A poor child," she whispered. "You almost made it." The girl's pupils seemed to flicker at the sound, but no life stirred beneath. Only a thin trickle of something black seeped from the corner of her mouth and ran down to her collar. Maribel reached out, closing the girl's eyes gently. "A peace now," she murmured. "The land has eaten its fill." The candle flame wavered violently, then steadied again. From the shadows of the hall came a faint sound, footsteps dragging softly, echoing like memory. She did not turn. "Come then," she said to the air. A shape coalesced near the doorway, a man's outline formed of smoke and dust. Augustus, or what was left of him. "You," the voice was hollow, distant. "Killed us." Maribel did not flinch. "I didn't need to. You did the work yourselves." The shape flickered, struggling against the weight of its own hatred. "You brought this, witchcraft, poison. I brought truth." Her voice was calm, almost weary. "Every field you plowed, every lash you gave, every belly you emptied, it was all there waiting. I only fed it what it was owed." The ghost stepped closer, its form rippling. "You could have spared them." "I did." She looked toward Odette's still face. "The innocent walk in circles until the land forgives them. The rest," her eyes met his, "they sit." A long silence followed. Then faintly, a low sound rose from the walls, the rhythmic hum that had haunted the house since her arrival. Only now it was not hers alone. The walls themselves hummed back, deep and resonant, like the heartbeat of buried thing. Augustus's form faltered, dissolving piece by piece until only the sound of his voice lingered. "You think this makes you holy?" "Oh no," Maribel said softly. "It makes me necessary." She began to move again, circling the table. For each family member, she set a plate. On each plate, a different dish. Gumbo for Claudine, blackened fish for Augustus, cornbread for Lucien, and a small bowl of white rice for Odette. The food looked fresh, steaming, alive. Yet the air above it shimmered, bending the light like heat. She sat at the empty chair opposite Augustus. For a moment, the room seemed to steady. No hum, no wind, only stillness. Then she reached for the ladle and began to serve herself. As she ate, the candlelight deepened from gold to crimson. Shadows thickened. The walls pulsed once, twice, as though the house itself drew another breath. Maribel looked around the table. "Once," she said, "you fed on others to live. Now the earth feeds on you." Lucien's head twitched slightly, jaw creaking open. From inside came a faint gurgle, almost like laughter. Claudine's hand trembled, her pearls clicking softly. Augustus's glass cracked in his frozen grip, and Odette, sweet, frightened Odette, let out a slow exhale. Maribel smiled faintly. "Yes," she said, "I let it out." The floor beneath them began to move, not violently, but rhythmically in small, breathing swells. Dust drifted down from the ceiling. The portraits along the wall tilted forward, faces inside them warping, dissolving into stains. Outside the ground shifted too. The soil around the plantation stirred like something restless beneath it. The cane stalks, half dead and black, began to rise again, creaking, curling inward toward the house. From above came the sound of water dripping, steady, insistent. Maribel looked up. The ceiling was weeping. Dark streaks ran down the walls, collecting on the table, mingling with the candle wax, spreading like veins. She did not move. "Take what's yours," she whispered. The room exhaled. Every candle went out. When light returned, faint and blue from the morning outside, the chairs were empty. The food on the plates had turned to ash. Only Maribel remained, sitting in the same position, eyes closed. Her face was calm, her hands folded. The scarf had slipped from her head, revealing a streak of gray through her hair. She rose slowly, gathering the plates one by one and carried them to the kitchen. Each one she placed in the basin, washed, and stacked neatly. The ritual of ending. When she was done, she opened the back door and stepped into the yard. The air smelled clean for the first time in weeks. The fields were silent. Far beyond the edge of the property, a single figure walked down the dirt road. A young woman in a torn white dress, hair loose, face turned away. Odette, or her ghost, or perhaps something in between. Maribel watched her go until she disappeared into the fog. Then she whispered, "To be free, little one." She turned back toward the house. The shutters flapped weakly. The walls groaned. "Asleep now," she said softly. "The debt is paid." And with that, she stepped off the porch and began walking toward the bayou. Her reflection shimmered faintly on the wet ground. Until it didn't, the house behind her let out one last sigh. The roof sagged inward, the walls folded like paper. When the dust settled, only the foundation stones remained, half swallowed by mud. The wind passed gently through the ruins, carrying with it a faint scent of spice, herbs, and smoke. By the time the next travelers came down that road, Saint Delacroix was nothing but a memory, a story whispered by the river folk about a cook who cursed her masters and made the house itself eat them alive. Some said on certain nights, if you listen close near the reeds, you can still hear her humming away. Ushund, uswe, soft rhythmic, a song meant for the dead.